Have you ever wondered, can you communicate directly with spirit guides, teachers, or non-physical consciousness, or even our higher selves? What would they tell us? My name is Kevin Moore, and since 2015, I started to practice a form of communication which is termed channeling. I have been interviewing experts on my talk show to find out, does life continue after we die? And can we communicate with those that have crossed over? With each expert I spoke to, they all had different ideas. Is there knowledge from the past which could be shared with the present moment? So I thought, why not just speak to the non-physical world directly through channelers around the world? And that's what I set out to do. They Call Us Channelers will take the viewers on a journey into the phenomena known as channeling. And my main goal with this docuseries is to bring a new understanding and awareness to channeling by looking within ourselves and asking, is it truly possible that we can all use this innate ability? Well, Lee, Carroll, thank you so much for joining us.
Kevin, I'm really happy to be here, and thank you for allowing this time together. We're going to have a nice time.
We are going to have a wonderful conversation, and we're here now in Indiana, where you're holding one of your many events.
That's right.
How many events do you do in a year?
Oh, wow. We can't, it's hard to tell that because we're starting to do excursions now, and that's week-long excursions into many places where Kryon will channel 2 or 3 times a day. So, and it's how you count them. But in the way of seminars, there's maybe 30 events, which are 2-day events in the States and Canada, and the rest are off-continent, which there's South America or there's Eastern Western Europe.
Could you imagine yourself doing anything else right now?
No. No. I'm not equipped to do anything else. I've been doing this for now 30 years. I came from an engineering background, and I had a good business and a good time, and I loved it. But that wouldn't be possible now either. I just cannot see me in any other skin but this one, doing what I'm doing.
How many years would you say in total you've been doing this for?
30.
30 years.
Yeah.
But that wasn't when you first started channeling, though.
This, I don't count the learning years. I just don't count them because these were, I'll call them the fear years. I wasn't there yet. It's not until I would say I opened my mouth in front of people where they came to see me, that's when the clock starts for me, and that was 89.
But did this start for you, so this started for you in 89?
It did.
Yeah.
It did. I travel with channeling friends. I'm one of the few that puts channelers on stage with me. And almost to the T, their experience was in 89. So I never knew that until we started talking over dinner.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty synchronistic.
It really is,
isn't it?
Yeah.
What do you think, though, of channeling in 2018? Because there's so many more channelers out there now.
I'll tell you this. I'm not aware of that, and you are. One of the attributes of my channel, every single channeler is unique. We all have which is our esoteric instructions. We all have perhaps the rules, and we all do it differently, which really exposes the uniqueness of a human being in channel. Is partly the countenance of the human is involved. And what we discovered early on, and when we were talking to each other, is about this very thing. There's no real right way or wrong way to channel that we found out. So that uniqueness is probably going to come out in your documentary, and I love that. So the beginning is, if you want to ask about that or whatever, I can tell you. But I've had so much experience with other channelers that we talk among ourselves. My rule is I cannot read or listen to other channelings, other than perhaps the ones with me. So that's because there's no delete key in the brain. I cannot undo what I hear. And so when you say there's 80 channelers out there or there's more now, I have no idea because I cannot read channel material.
Is that so you don't get influenced?
Exactly. I'm a human. And even though I go into what you would call trance and all that, they're still using my brain, my countenance, all of these things. So I am not supposed to be listening to any other ideas at all that might be channeled. And this just makes sense to me. It keeps me pure.
I would say that was a conversation I was having today with someone. Which is funny you bring that up, actually, because, when we look at materials like the Seth material, for example.
Beautiful material.
Fantastic material,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Have you ever come across the Seth material?
I did early on. This is and what I do is I separate a lot of the channeling between the dispensations we're going through and the shift, and a lot of it was in a very old, difficult energy, where channelers had to huff and puff and do this in order even to get into a place where they could channel, and there's nothing wrong with it. That was just then, and now is now, because it's very different. Seth was in that era. And I think it was Jane, was her name?
Yes, Jane Roberts.
Yes, Jane Roberts. And when I looked at the Seth material before I ever started channeling, I recognized something that I believe is very what I would call Kryon-esque, that the messages were actually similar. And I've always thought that might have been difficult back then. And I've really enjoyed and honored that.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we were discussing earlier on was that, when we, having met so many channelers, right, you hear that Seth material in some of the other channelers, and you think, well, with channeling, is it the case that sometimes we can get influenced by other material, and sometimes that can be regurgitated through the human self
I
as well?
believe it can be. And
Yeah.
that's why I'm not allowed to see it. I have heard of Seth. I've not read the material, and that comes through other people talking to me about, hey, your material sounds a lot like Seth. There's another axiom that I will say, and is that we're all coming from the same source. This is what I believe. That means that you're going to hear similar things. If not verbatim, I would expect it. If the channeler is in touch with what the messages are today, coming through the veil accurately, you're going to hear very similar material between channelers, and it doesn't matter what language they're speaking or where they're from.
Yeah, absolutely. And on this documentary, I have asked those questions that have never, well, I hope they've never been asked before, right?
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've just tried to go a little bit deeper
Yes.
than some other documentaries. I mean, that's no judgment on any other work,
No,
right?
you do it.
Just to go. Is there anything worthwhile going beyond the unknown? And does that bring something into our present moment that maybe is helpful in some way? Or, do you know what I found actually interviewing all these channelers is that when you go further in the unknown, it only takes you back to present moment more.
I've always been under the impression that I don't have a choice. In other words, I don't delve. I don't go there. I don't look around. I'm open to the messages that come to me. And so there are those I know who have crossed the veil and do look around. And I've talked to them, and I have actually done a little research without looking at the channeling. And I know it's possible. I don't. And so what I receive is what I receive. And to the depth that I receive it, it is up to what comes to me. So I'm not there saying, well, today I think I'll go a little deeper. I only have one depth, and that's where I go. And from then on, that's what's delivered to me.
Okay. So just with your journey as well, obviously, you're an inspiration to the channeling community as well. A lot of other channelers love you. There's a lot of people out there that adore you, and the message that comes from Kryon as well. Obviously, I don't forget you in that part as well, because without you, we wouldn't have Kryon, right? But where did it all start for you? What was that one starting moment that you can think back to say, wow, that moment changed my life because I made that choice to say yes to it?
It's a longer story than you want from here, but I can summarize it not in a soundbite, but by a little brief story. And that is, you got to remember, this happened in my 40s. You also have to remember that I was an engineer. And at that time, very logical, very man-brain. I was married to a woman who was esoteric, and I asked her, please don't involve me in all of this woo-woo stuff. I really wasn't ready. I didn't believe in it. But she was the one who took me to a channeler. And at that time, an older gentleman in his 60s, Frank Alper was his name. He's passed now, and I forever remember this man, because I thought it was the silliest thing I'd ever seen. I thought it was going to be a channeling like people come and see. It was a private channel. It was for her birthday that I went. I never would have gone. And I almost kneecap to kneecap with this guy, and I think I slept a little. He knew I didn't want to be there, but he did what he did, and he channeled, and I left. And that was the first channeling experience I'd ever had. And to make a long story short, 3 years later, my wife at the time, Jan Tober, took me to another channel. This was a young guy, and he was only 21. And he was more of a psychic than a channel, but it was a private session. And I walked in, and he looked at me. He said, "You don't want to be here, do you?" And I said, "Boy," he said, "I like you. You really are psychic." And he proceeded to give me a message, and it was just a message, a really quick one. And he said, "There is a magnetic master that wants to get a hold of you named Kryon." And I looked at him, and I went, and I said, "That's it?" And he said, "That's it." And I left that, and I went, this is like just nuts. This, they're all nuts. The old guy, the young guy, whatever. Then I thought to myself, I've heard the name, Kryon. That's not occurred before. You haven't heard, that's a name that just hasn't been around. If he had said, Mother Mary wants to talk to you, or whatever, I would have said, oh, that's nice. But it was Kryon. It sounds like some magic guru or something. And in my mind, I said, I've heard it before, I've heard it before, I've heard it before. And I went and found the cassette. That'll tell you what the age of this was. The cassette that was recorded with Frank Alper 3 years earlier. And I found it in Jan's closet. She didn't even know I was looking. I wanted to make sure she was gone, because I didn't want to, let her know I was looking for something like that. So I found it and I played it, and that phrase was on the tape at about 46 minutes. There's a magnetic master who wants to get hold of you named Kryon. And I about fell over. So I got a linear mind in a linear world, a man brain that wants me everything to settle out. And I had two men, 3 years apart, didn't know each other, 40 years difference in age, that gave me the same message. That's impossible. And so what that did is to force me to sit down. Now, you got to understand, and this is where I love it, I believe that there's a plan. I believe that the Creator created us in a magnificent way, and we have free choice, but often we're pushed into a corner that would let us choose, perhaps with a bigger potential than others. And maybe the other channels have said this too. But there's a point at which you realize and have to acknowledge there's something bigger going on than what you thought. Now, I wasn't about to say that, but I saw literally something that couldn't happen. And so I had to have resolution, and this is the big part, because my personality wants resolution. As an engineer, I want everything in its place. I want things to add up. I want the stuff to make sense. So I was literally pushed into saying, what will I do? So I got a chair out, and I said, okay, Kryon or whoever you are, whatever, if it's real, show me. That's what I said. I sat down in the chair. And I didn't hear voices. There wasn't any channeling, but I started weeping immediately. And I was overcome with what now I know is love. And I wasn't used to that. I actually got angry. I popped out of the chair. I said, don't ever do that. Because men don't like to cry except they're on their own terms. And it was night and day. It was cause and effect. And I did it again and again, and I realized there is something here. And then eventually I was drawn to the chair, and then the channeling started coming, and boy, was it tough. I mean, I only got pieces and parts, and it wasn't free flowing. Jen wanted me to do it in front of people, and I said, you're nuts, I don't want to do that, there's no future in this, what is this for me? I was wrong on all accounts. That's the history of how it started. And this was in, actually long before 89. 89 is when, I put the shingle out.
I thought so. I thought it was going back a bit.
Yeah.
And when we say, when we term the idea of, okay, I'm bringing Kryon through, I'm bringing for myself maybe the one through, or for other channels a dronus or whatever it may be, right? Yeah. Could it be that this is our higher self?
Absolutely. In fact, there are channels who will admit it's their higher self and will say, now I'm going to channel my higher self. Kryon has made it very clear it's not my higher self. Others who are doing their higher self, you can't tell the difference because they're connected to the same source. So it really doesn't matter at all. So if I was or was not, it would be the same source. But Kryon is very, very clear, never been a human. This is from the other side of the veil, specifically for the shift. So information for the shift, and that's what I'm channeling. So the name and where it came from, it's just weird. It's a funny thing. It sounds like some technician from beyond. Kryon says it's the sound of the name and it's the numerology. And we've done the numerology, and it's an 11, which in Tibetan numerology is means illumination. We've done a lot of numerology around Kryon and things. And now I'm starting to understand a little bit more about that name. Then Kryon says, like your other channels will also tell you, it feels like a group.
Right. So
Yeah.
even for you, it feels like a group.
It does. And that is because we're linear, and on the other side of the veil, it is not. And so that groupdom, if you want to, is what we feel when we feel a non-linear kind of energy. And then Kryon just says, I am a group. You wouldn't understand that, but as much as God is a group. God is not singular anymore. You can have God listen to 4 billion people all praying at the same time. There's got to be something there that is not a one guy with 2 ears. And so you realize and you start to understand a multidimensional force, God, beautiful energy. That's where the entity is coming from. If it isn't even an entity, it's more angelic, I think, than entity.
Right, yes, and
Yeah.
and as time's gone on, you've come to feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're probably even on a course right now of even the discovery of what this still is, in a sense.
Indeed, you're absolutely right, and we all are. We all are. Just when a channeler thinks he knows, she knows who, what, and how, it changes. It has to, because we are changing. The energy is changing. Our ability to communicate is changing.
Would you say that Kryon could be a bit like a life coach in a sense?
Oh, absolutely. He's a life coach for humanity, for me as well. But if you take a listen to what the actual messages are, there's a similarity over years and years. Kryon keeps saying the same thing in another way. And the parables, same thing in another way. And you could start listing them on paper. And the one, it's all about self-worth, born magnificent instead of dirty, trying to get us on board with the fact that there's a plan, that consciousness is physics, that we can change things because we're going to need to with this awakening that the planet is going through. So yeah, life coach, absolutely.
Yeah, and that awakening that you mentioned just there, that shift that you mentioned that's been going on since the early 80s or mid 80s when this started for you, that's still carrying through now.
Not only just carrying through, you'd have to do the ABCs of what Kryon is teaching, and it didn't come from Kryon. It came from the indigenous. It comes right through the prophecy of the ages. Whether you're going to the prophecy of the eagle and the condor, which is in Mexico, whether you're talking to the Lakota or the Hopi or the Maya, it's all the same prophecy. The Mayan calendar is what we're talking about. And the prophecy has said very, very clearly that if we make it past the precession of the equinoxes, that 26,000-year wobble, and don't destroy ourselves, which was happening, that we would move into a period of time when the planet can have the highest consciousness that it's ever had. We had to move into this area. And why? That's another story. When I was born, I'm a senior, we had 50,000 nuclear weapons all pointed at each other with the Soviet Union. We were headed right for the dumper. That's what Scripture said. That's what Nostradamus said. We were just right on schedule. And then it all shifted. And that's what you remember in the 80s. That's what took place. Kryon comes in at the same time the Soviet Union was falling over. And Kryon in Book 1, he says, the magnetic grid is going to change because it needs to for higher consciousness. You're not going to have an Armageddon. You're not going to have the end of the earth. You're going to go right past it because that's the potentials that are being seen. And that's what took place. That's what we're experiencing. So when you look at the precession of the equinoxes, there's a 36-year window going in and coming out. And we're in that last 18 years of it. We've actually just started since 2012. In 5 years we're here. Yeah, we're very into it. And we're starting to see in our society exactly what Kryon said were the potentials.
So there is a great change happening right now.
A magnificent change.
And maybe we've only seen the very, very beginning of it, if that.
That's correct. Yeah. But the fact that it's happened outside of spirituality, and what I mean by that, human consciousness, if it changes, is not going to be the church changing. It's not going to be New Age changing. It's not going to be esoteric. It's not going to be channelers. It's going to be regular human beings. And what we're starting to see is stuff that's been hidden forever start to fly out of the cracks of the darkness right in front of us, whether it's the abuse of women, or whether it's abuse of kids, whether it's the church and the priests and all this stuff. It's been around for a century or more. And now it starts to fly out of the cracks. And that's what it feels like, because this is new. This is new. But it tracks what Kryon said to expect. And that would be a cleanup of old energy that was always allowed to be there because human consciousness was low. As we start to raise it even slightly, regular humanity is going to start to see these things. And what's coming? He's talked about what's coming. He says, The fall of Big Pharma will be here. Banking will change again. All of these things. These are not things that are going to affect us in some huge event that is going to take us into the dumper. On the other hand, we're going to start cleaning up our act.
Yeah, and for people watching this,
Yeah.
this is not just our field or our bubble. There's so many other bubbles out there in other fields that this transparency is coming in. Things are becoming a lot more transparent. If there is a lie being told about something long term, there will be transparency coming out for that lie in the end.
It's happening now, and there are big lies yet to be more transparent. One of the biggest ones, if I can tell you, on this planet right now, we start, as a world traveler, I've been seeing posters for a long time on child slavery, sexual child slavery. It is so bad and so prevalent that these posters are in airports all over Europe and now starting to be in the United States. Look for this, by the thousands. There's an underground here that is unconscionable, that is hard to look at. And when it starts to be shown, people won't even believe that it's been happening. And that is going to fall.
Absolutely, but that field also attracts people who aren't authentic in it, where they are, talking about people or accusing people when they've not done such things, and it attracts people who are unauthentic. And I think I have to look at that even in our field of channeling. How do we use discernment with channelers to know that they are being authentic to us?
It's easy. It's easy for me. When I started channeling, and I wish I was more prepared for this particular question. On my site, on my channeling page, if you go to the bottom, there's going to be rules for channeling that I got in '87, 2 years before I started channeling publicly, that says how to recognize if a channel is real. And they're listed one by one, and it has to do things like a channeler will never ask you to do something that's out of integrity. A channel, and it goes from there. And these are things that make so much sense. That the information will be new. There's not going to be greed involved. It should be given away. All of these things that make total sense. And I posted that so people could compare that then to what followed and the hundreds of channels that are out. So it's on my page now. That is the judge, and I think it's a really good litmus test for what I will call real channeling. The other thing I'll tell you, there's no channeler who can point at another and say that he's right or wrong, or he's getting it or he's not getting it. They can say that, but that's not part of the system. That's not part of an integrity, compassionate love system to criticize another at all. We don't make people wrong. I tell people, I want you to listen and judge for yourself, and I want you to feel it and hear it. That's the only litmus test. It's got to ring true to your heart.
Absolutely, and we'll link that list on the bottom of this video as well. I know exactly what the list you're talking about.
Right.
I've seen that's a great list. But for example, if I was, and I am a journalist in other fields, right? Where if I was to look at a story and it wasn't to be true, for example, I've done my research to find out why it wasn't true. I've met A, B, C, and they've said this guy or this woman is not telling the truth for that reason.
That's right.
You can't seem to apply that to channeling.
You can't apply it to channeling, but Kryon actually has said these words in channel. He said, beware of those who give you doom and gloom under the guise of channeling. And there are still those who might do that, and they're not channeling. And that's the point.
Well, that's the thing. I've always found your channeling to be so inspirational, so uplifting, very beautiful.
But that is the story, is that we have a future that most people not only are not willing to go there, but human nature, for whatever reason, clings to the past and even consciousness. If something good happens in the world, the press will come in and they won't say, wow, this is the beginning of something that might really be something. Let's stay tuned. And instead they say, nah. It's not going to happen. Look at the past. It never happened before. It's not going to happen again. So, even if it's really good. That is a bias. And that is a bias that we all have that thing. And that is, we've lived and grown up in an energy that promotes that. It's skeptical of new things, good things, or anything. I've been called the Pollyanna channel for that reason. And we are to some degree stuck there even today. There are some things emerging, like the Good News channel on Google and other things who are admitting, look, you're not really getting everything. There's a lot of good news they're never showing.
Yeah. Well, I use the word fear porn for some of the stuff. Do you know what I mean? That's my take on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, where, and do you know what, that the problem with that stuff is it attracts a lot of people.
Well, as a journalist, you say there's a difference between reporting things and creating things, and marketing drives this, and it's ferocious. And so there often can be a bias to present a story in a certain way so more people will tune in, or a lead line, or a title. There are more people tune in. And can I share with you something just in my, well, the way I make money is seminars, and that's Lee Carroll dancing around on the stage talking about what Kryon has said. But when I sit down to channel Kryon, it's recorded and given away free. So hundreds of hours on my site are free, and that's the line I walk. Well, because it's not proprietary and because it's free, it's all over YouTube. Now, I have yet to post one channel on YouTube, but there's thousands of them. And so what people have done is to take the channeling, put fearful messages on it. People will click, they'll see an ad, they get money. This is happening constantly. So you see there's a lack of integrity in that, and there's nothing there that I really want to do about it, because I think it's going to seek its own level.
Yes.
But so fearful messages are posted on YouTube from Kryon that never said them, and people will click and get whatever they get for that, and that's an industry based upon my channeling.
And it's very difficult to police that sometimes.
It is,
that
and
takes
nor
a
do I
massive
really
team.
don't want to police it. I believe that it's going to be seen and acknowledged, and people understand that.
And thank you for bringing that up as well. I think that's important because I went through the same process when listening to yourself, and it was, like you say, that right title. You think, oh God, what's that? And you listen to it. It's a very loving message. It's only the kind of loving message you would have normally given, right?
It's
but
still
it's just
me.
repackaged. Yeah, it's still you.
It has nothing to do with it. But
Yeah.
they got their money up front when somebody clicks.
Absolutely. And one thing I found in my field recently, having been in the UFO and consciousness field for a while, is I've noticed a new trend coming up, which scares me sometimes, but it shouldn't do. Is the idea that conspiracy has come a lot more into the spiritual side, and I never thought I would see that in my lifetime, and it's happening now as we speak.
Why do you think that's happening, Ken?
I've questioned myself deep about that.
I think it's because the spiritual side is becoming more attractive, and so people and the spiritual side being more attractive, if you can take the conspiracy and pull it into the thing that's more attractive, there are going to be more people having attention to it. You should take a look at some of the series that are extremely spiritual, tied into extremely conspiratorial, and I've seen it too. So it's about marketing. I think it's all about marketing.
Yes, it is, but I mean, I've had emails from my people to say, listen, Kev, why are you only covering the spiritual when 50% of it you should be covering is the secret space program or something like that.
That's right.
You can't be a good journalist in this field and not cover both. They're both connected now, and I'm like, they're not.
Unless you're a specialist. You could be. Like, for instance, they wouldn't say that if you're supposed to be reporting sports, and you're reporting sports, and they say, well, why aren't you reporting UFOs? And you say, well, I report sports. And right now, in your job, and what you're doing sitting in that chair right now, is reporting about channeling.
Yes, that's right. And this is really important to me, the channeling is.
So you can't really be criticized for a documentary that's only on channeling. You may then turn over and do something that is different on another subject, but you'll be focusing then on that one.
Of course. And, for myself, I mean, this whole journey, this whole documentary ends with you in a sense, right? Which is a beautiful thing. And this started off so many years ago when I started to channel a group called The One, right? That's how I got into it.
It was a group, wasn't it, Ken?
Yeah, it was a group. And from there, and Edgar Casey was part of this group.
Yes.
But he always said that it was an aspect of Casey. It was never Casey as the full incarnation. It was an aspect.
Yeah, you understand that?
I think I do.
That's why people can channel Jesus. It's an aspect of Jesus. It's not Jesus fully embodied as the entity. It's 1,000 parts of the Master of Love that would come in, and so many people are aware of that and channeling it. And I've heard this from so many people who are channeling the same entity, and it'll be somebody famous or some spiritual master, and it'll be accurate and true, but it's just a small portion of it. Because the oversoul is enormous. It's not singular.
And we to try to understand what that is, and even for Kryon, I'm guessing it's there's a limit to some understanding.
Well, that's why anybody can channel Kryon.
How do you feel about that?
I feel good. In fact, in Europe, twice, I did something nobody had ever done before because there were many channelings. There were many Cryons popping up. I went to Europe, and I forgot the first year I went. Within, I would say, 5 years, there were 6 or 7 Cryons. And there was one in South America, and there was one in Mexico, and there was 3 in Germany, and whatever. So when I went to Europe, I decided, what if I put all of them on stage together? Because I had something I want to show people. I want to let people in the audience, hear it, make up their minds or whatever. So we brought the one from South Africa. Brown was his name, great guy, and some of the other ones from Germany. Put them all, and we all channeled, and we did twice. It was great. It really was, and the messages were almost identical. There was a tremendous amount of love there, and I let people know. See, it's not a proprietary thing where you're going to follow a guru. I don't like that guru, and I'm not going to read them anymore because this one is the one I wanted today. And understanding that the oversoul of all of this is a tremendous energy, like we would think of God, and that energy is what we're channeling. And if 18 people want to do Kryon at the same time, it's just fine, because the information is so great and so loving. And that's what we got on stage. We didn't get any one of them who was giving bad information or information that wasn't what we would normally give. One by one on stage together, we would this one. Yeah.
That's incredible.
All Kryon.
All Kryon.
All Kryon.
And were they maybe from different parallel universes, maybe?
No, it's the same. Same creative source.
Same
you don't have to
creative
be in a
source.
parallel universe to be connected to the creative source, to
Yeah.
God, to Spirit.
Right, and these are all different aspects of God. We're all different aspects of God.
It might have
Yeah.
been the same aspect, and we're all simply channeling differently from that same aspect.
And it's getting to know itself just in that different.
You can't linearize it, these things. For instance, if I said, okay, you've got a higher self. If you believe that, I say, where is that higher self? And you might say, well, it's higher. What we're getting to is this, is you realize you've got a part of you that's also on the other side of the veil. So now it's in you and it's also there. Now that's 2. How many do we need for a group? And it goes beyond that. Kryon has talked about your higher self involved not only upstairs, but with other people.
What about if I go back to myself here as an example, right? When I still am fighting being a channeler, even after doing this documentary right now, being with yourself, right, who I love and adore, right, and I do that for all the channelers are amazing, right? I'll just say that I've got a lot of love for them, and yet I sit here in front of you and I'm like, oh my God, why can't it just be easier for me? Why the resistance of wanting to do that? When what I should be saying was, if this is your way of going to help people, just get out that door and do it.
How many people do you think will see this?
I don't know is the answer to that.
And let's say there's tens of thousands. And who exactly is it who put that together?
Right. Yeah.
This is what you're doing. You're doing just what I'm doing in your way. In a way, you're channeling it. So you can't sit there and say, why can't I do something? You're doing something that hasn't been done before like this and affecting tens of thousands of people perhaps when they see this, when they hear me. That's what you're here for, and this is what you're doing. So don't sit there and tell me you can't channel.
I can, and I channeled with Marilyn.
Yeah. Okay, so you know it. But maybe what you're doing in documentary today is going to affect more people than anything you would ever do with Marilyn or anything else now. And perhaps later that will change. But you're right in the niche you belong in.
Well, thank you. And one interesting thing that we did with Marilyn, and I did this with another channeler as well, is my channel spoke to Marilyn's channel.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what's interesting about that, what came through, was that actually, as channelers, we think we know what it can be used for, but actually it's just as important for the progression of the entities themselves as it is for the people that it's helping.
Very much so. Marilyn and I channel side by side constantly. We do it every week. And quite often, the channeling is one channeling with 2 of us, and simply it continues. So whoever channels first, it just continues. And the subject, so it's like one subject given by 2. there is a field we connect into that's enormous but focused, very loving, very compassionate, that has a message. And we deliver it as we can, and even collectively. That's what I think that all those channelers were doing on stage in Europe. And also we did it here in the States with, Marilyn was involved when we had 12 channelers all together on stage in Shasta or Sedona. I think it was Sedona. I'm forgetting
Sedona,
now.
yeah.
And Marilyn was one of them. And maybe some of the ones you've interviewed are the others. And we found the same thing true. It's almost like each one of us got 15 minutes. It's almost like one message.
Yeah.
And from one to the next to the next to the next, it just continued.
On some of the entities that came through, and I call them entities, but it's
I understand
aspect
that.
of God.
Yep.
But you know what I mean.
I do.
They some of them knew the other channels.
Yeah.
Some of them did not. Some of them were so far out into the unknown, they were on a separate mission, wanting to find the others, they called it.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, you're linearizing the other side of the veil, and we can't do it. So you make an assumption that they're singular units, and that they're out there someplace, and that we are touching base with singular units, not understanding the collective idea, that at some level they're all connected. Now, whether they seem to, quote unquote, know each other, that's a singular idea from human to human as well. So we tend to humanize the other side of the veil completely, and we ask questions as though the other side of the veil was linear in 3D with our consciousness, and it isn't.
Well, let me ask you this as well. When you're bringing Kryon through, it's not just, I'm guessing, it's not just a continuous audio stream. It's another way that this is working for you.
Thought groups. It is like enhanced intuition. There's a lot of people who depend upon their intuition, is very good at it. And if you say, well, what did it sound like? They'll say, well, there's no sound. I'll say, what did it feel like? Well, there was no real feeling, it just was. I just knew it. And that is what we all say. It comes in a stream that's linear, but they're thought groups. They occur and are pressed into our consciousness, and out they come. So they're not words on the wall. They're not a stream that we're listening to. They are presented to us as though it was our own brain while we're in that trance. Some of us stay there listening, like I do, and some of us are removed completely from it. Marilyn can't remember anything.
No, but you're part of it.
I can remember everything. Marilyn can get up and walk around the room. I have to stay in the chair with my eyes closed. So you see how different this is? But all of us have that same thing, that it's as though we're speaking with our mind, our brain, our consciousness, because that's where it's put. So that's how it feels. And there's more. I think it was chapter 2 of the last book, 13, when Kryon, I described what it was like when I'm there for me. And that is the part that is so different from channel to channel, especially in the older energy. You know that there are channels in the older energy said that they were aged when they were in channel.
And there's still a few like that now. Only a few, very few.
I youth.
Yes.
I want to stay there because I know that every minute in channel is a minute off of that's going to be added to my life.
Well, why the difference then?
I don't know.
Well, okay, I'm going to put it out there then. Is one channeling something that's a bit more darker, and you're channeling something that's a bit more lighter?
I don't think so. I think it's just the difficulty of getting to that state for some human beings is more than others. The release. How open can you be? Do you fight it? Even if you're given good stuff, are you there fighting it the whole time going, I don't know, this is hard, I don't know, this is hard. And then your whole body's going, oh, For mine, it's just wide open.
Are you ever bothered, or were you ever concerned at one point that, oh my God, what's going to come through? Am I going to, is it going to make sense?
Totally, constantly. When I first started, what bothered me is that I was a good Boy Scout. And the Boy Scout motto in America is be prepared. All right. So here I am sitting in front of people, and I always got to that, what if he doesn't come in? And they paid money to see me and hear Kryon, and what if nothing happens? Or an auditorium filled with people, who come and I'll do my presentation and sit down, and this always in the back of my mind, what happens if nothing? And it's never ever happened. I know it's a double negative. Kryon has always been there. In fact, sometimes before I even start, ready to go. and I'm just going to say it. We're talking about the love of God. That's what we're talking about, the love of Spirit, the Creator. And that love is so great for us. It's around us all the time, can hardly wait to touch us, hold our hand, take us places and do things. I'm never going to be devoid of that voice, because as long as I say I want to do it, it's always there. And there's no preparation. I don't huff, I don't puff, my head doesn't spin around, green soup doesn't come out. None of that. It's just there.
Yeah.
Right there.
Right. And look, it's taking you around the world all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's provided for you because you trusted it. You went with it.
You wasn't always that way. And I'll be the first to tell you, my fight on this was fear. And it's 2 or 3 pronged layers of fear. Number one, will it always happen? Because I don't want to be a fool. Number 2, I quit my job. That's the other thing. You need to fear for your living if it stops. Fear 3, my friends were good Christian people. What happened? My boys were grown up in a Christian home. What's going to happen? Do I really come out? I remember the first time when I was just starting, and I had book 2 out, and it appeared in Costco. Now, Costco is a big container store where a lot of people go, and my books were there. And I just freaked because I knew that my boys shopped there too with their mom, who I was divorced from at the time, and I still have it. I mean, I came back, and I freaked because I said they're going to see me. They're going to see my name. Then I remembered what I had done, and now you'll know something else about me. And I'm not afraid to admit it. This fear, when I started, became a joke later. When you look at a Kryon book, not the ones that Hay House have published, but mine, and it's very, very different, you will see my name is not on the cover. Now, what other author do you know whose name is not on the cover? Then when you turn it over, you got to look for it. It's on the bottom left in 10-point type, and it says L. Carroll. Doesn't even give my first name. I did that so that nobody would know who I was. And I freely admit that that's the fear. I want everybody to see it. It was so prominent with me, I kept the style. And now I laugh at it, and I tell people, take a look at this, because I was afraid. And why? And now I look, and Christ says, are you afraid of love? You're afraid of are you afraid that your whole life will be destroyed because you do this? And that's folly. Instead, what I got was very understanding kids. They know who I am, what I do. Yes, I lost some of my Christian friends, and I gained others. And those Christian friends to this day, I only lost them because there was a perception that they had about me. And I still love them very, very much. But things happen. The things that I was afraid of, many of them did, but the fear was a paper tiger. Totally. But I keep that style in the book just to remind myself, and I tell this story in seminars so that people will see who I am, where I came from. I'm just like anybody.
Of course you are. Of course you are. And I mean, this way of helping people can be brought through many ways. Like I mentioned that you're to me, there's that life coach aspect.
Yeah.
But what is channeling to you then?
I can't imagine life without it. I talk to Kryon myself. Kryon talks to me in the shower. It's the craziest thing, through intuition. He's my life coach in the shower. And sometimes I'll ask him things, there'll be no answer. No answer, and I'll get back in the shower. I get clean sometimes, really clean. There are certain days. Then I find out that the negative ionization of water in a shower actually is something that a lot of people experience, that is a potential for greater spirituality. Yeah. And it's a life coach. I depend upon it. I was talking to my seminar even today, and the people were there saying, you can create synchronicity yourself, and this is how I live my life. If you amplified the number of flights I take for 18 years, when it takes 2 or 3 airplanes just to get to a certain place and 2 or 3 to get back, and then you extend that to South America and Eastern Europe and Western Europe and all like that for 18 years, how many airplanes have I been on? And here's what I want to tell you, that they break down, their crews don't show up, the weather changes, and so there's always a percentage that they won't fly. And they don't. I have never missed a meeting, Ken, ever. Yeah. And sometimes, in most times domestically, I'm flying in the day before, sometimes the morning of. Never missed a meeting. This is control over randomness. And I teach this. We have this kind of control over life.
Absolutely. So you would say, just going back to channeling then,
yes,
that There are other ways to connect with people, isn't there? There's other ways to show people their greatest version, because that's what channeling does as well.
Well, this is what Kryon teaches. He says, if you believe the things that are being given, you'll understand that your testimony of who you are is how you act. It's not how you channel, because not everybody is a channeler. So the information is that if you can have greater compassion and you start to evolve into a spirit that is more compassionate human, people are going to be attracted to this. And what they're attracted to is your change and the change that you have. You're more comfortable with life. You're looking better. You're feeling better. You're more joyful. And that's not a spiritual thing. You're not giving out a Kryon book. You're not sitting on the corner and hanging a sign that says, listen to me, or God is coming, or whatever. This is you with your kids and you at work. You become a more compassionate person. People notice. That's the teaching.
But then aren't we always channeling in some form?
Of course. That's when you start realizing, and people say this a lot, I am doing things that I never could do before. Am I channeling Kryon? No. You are now hooked in to that which every single human being has, and that, what do you want to call it, the creative source? Whether you call it your higher self or whatever, that's God inside. This is the original idea of the Hindu, God inside. The namaste that you do is a symbolic for the God in me sees a God in you. And that's what we teach, and that's what is taught with so many places. When you start using the God inside, you start changing.
When I see your events, first of all, I just want to say there's a whole age range of people in there right now, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And there's more men right now.
More men than there ever has been before.
Yeah.
And young people starting to come. And I mean young people, I mean under 30.
Yeah.
And there's not many. They're busy. Kids are busy. They got stuff to do.
Yeah.
And I understand that. I did too when I was that age. So I'm always amazed to see them. Usually we start pondering our spirituality a little later in life, when things settle down and all. But we're seeing young people come, and the interesting thing is they come in groups odd numbers. They're not coupling. They're coming in 3s and 7s and things like this. Just all the social networking. They just get together and show up. This is just astonishing. I can sit with these kids and they can talk to a senior, and that's who I am. And we relate. And it really is the God in me sees the God in them, and they have that too. I'm telling you, this is new.
Where do you think channeling's going to go? Because I see in your events, and I see this in others, that there is now more and more people coming to these events, in a sense, right? It never runs out of people. That people leave your event, I think, with that ability to be able to go within and find their own answers, right?
There's a couple of things I'll say, Kevin.
Yeah.
Kryon has actually given the potential of where channeling is going. That's in the future. I'll give you that in a moment. But for right now, that crowd, for instance, today, 50% were new. 50. And that, to me, is astonishing. At where I am in my career in this 30 years, I thought we'd be winding down by now. I think this is like, I've been doing it a long time, the message is the message, and instead, it's starting to advance. And what we're seeing is new people. What this tells me is what Kryon has said before. There's an awakening going on that's subtle, of old souls, people who've been to the planet many, many times, and that's who we're talking to, that are feeling something among themselves, and they're coming to see what it is. That's the only thing that I can tell you. So the channeling at this point, all of us in this documentary, is important, because that is the life coach in us, giving the information to those who are awakening. Here's what's going on. Here's what's going on. Don't be afraid of it. The planet is changing because of this and that, so you're on track. But eventually, where this is going with an evolvement is that there will be no more channelers. Because we're going to have a heightened intuition to the point at which we will be our own life coaches and guides. We won't need to report anywhere else and listen to anybody else.
Yeah, and I see that coming as well.
Uh-huh.
I mean, whether it's in our lifetime or not, right?
Right, I agree.
Right? It doesn't matter, but that's where it's heading towards.
It has to be.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Yeah.
Right. So the days of the gurus are numbered. The days of the channelers are numbered, and it's all exceptional good news. And if it happened in my lifetime, I'd celebrate it. Because this would mean we had a higher consciousness of humans on the planet, and we're less likely to hurt each other, less likely to go to war, and here it comes.
Absolutely. What would you say then, really, is the most important message of the work right now that you're doing?
The most important thing that Kryon has ever said, and he says it repeatedly, to humanity, and that is understand that there's a change here, and that the change is a good change. Don't fear it, because we do. When anything changes that's unusual and goes to a place that we didn't expect, the first thing we think is doom. That's not what's happening. And the other thing that Kryon says repeatedly too is that, again, you're not a victim of this planet, and you have control over the things that happen to you in degrees that you wouldn't even imagine. And you'll meet a metaphysical person, and they'll say, well, there are no accidents. And then you'll laugh and say, well, yeah, why did I break my arm? And the answer is, so that you'd sit down and talk to me, and otherwise I wouldn't see you. In other words, there's usually reasons. But it goes beyond that. And that's just what I call planned synchronicity. There's no such thing as luck when you're making it. That is what we have in front of us that is a tool we've never had before or realized. That's the message that Kryon wants us to relax in the change and understand how powerful we are.
That's a beautiful message. That is, and I thank you so much for that. I thank you for the work that you're doing. And if people want to know and find out more about you, they would go to
Kryon.com. It's easy. And that is, by the way, where all the channels are. I'd like to tell people, if you're watching me, whatever time this documentary is done, if you're watching me on YouTube, it's not the place we are. Because on Kryon.com, there's a page, 20,000 hits a day. It's still that way because there's hundreds of hours of channeling, and they're arranged in order that makes sense. Not YouTube. YouTube is not arranged in any order at all. So if you go to my site, Kryon.com/audio, you'll go right to that page, and you can listen. You don't have to give your email. There's nothing. It's just free. Nobody keeps track of you, and that's what we want. Sometimes when people will see me go into channel, they will say, I've heard this, I say, you don't prepare enough. You sit down on your channel. I said, everyone else that we see goes through stuff. And what I say is that something happened a few years ago when Kryon looked at me and says, are you done segmenting me? And I said, what does that mean? And he says, you have gone to church all your life. So you dress and you go to a building and you prepare yourself in some way, and then you undress and get back in your jeans, and you're not in that building. And that's what he says, that's what you're doing with me. You bring me in and you take me out. He says, what we're teaching is that whatever you have that's the close to your higher self, you can have 24/7. So that's when I integrated. And with the integration came the ability to go into channel at any time for any reason. On airplanes without Spock, I can channel. I can write. It comes and goes and comes and goes and comes and goes, and it is no difficulty at all. It's a beautiful integration. So as I go into channel, that's what you're going to see. Okay, all right. Greetings, dear ones. I'm Kryon of Magnetic Service. Kevin, I know where I am. I know what is happening here. In fact, the beauty of this multi-dimensional state is that in this field of potentials, I can tell who might watch, who might be seeing this instead of in a place where you're recording. And that means that I can talk individually to humans potentially who will be seeing this, who need certain kinds of messages. And there's so much love involved in this ability, in this knowingness. What is your question?
Well, firstly, thank you for agreeing to do this with me, because I'm guessing that beyond this understanding that we've agreed to do this.
Yes.
Yes. Right, that makes sense. I was wondering that. Do you know that? Okay. Well, my first question to you is, creating the life that we want. How do we create a life that we really wish to manifest? And can we create the life that we wish to manifest?
You first start by releasing what you think you want to manifest. The idea that you can create the ideal job that you think is the one, or the partner that you think is the one, or the condition that you think is right for you is extremely human and linear. Instead, would you be satisfied with saying, I need solution? This or something better. Yes, I need a partner. This or something better. This is how I think it might go. But then something happens and it doesn't go that way. And instead, you get something different or better. And you realize in retrospect, you have actually given allowance by getting out of the way of your desires of where it's going to be. And the answer is, in this intent that you give, there is power. It's like the affirmation that you can give and say over and over, and suddenly it becomes you, because the power of your voice and your intent is something unique in the planet, in the universe, really. It is consciousness. It's sacred consciousness. So in this, in the answer to your question, you get out of the way of what you think you want. And instead, you relax into the solution that you see already as something you don't know, but you're happy with. You see yourself as content because it's solved. You see yourself content because you have this or something better. So the answer truly is, don't be specific.
So if I say I want, or someone's watching this thinks they want such and such, for example, they want to attract this thing into their life, or a particular career path.
Yes.
Are you saying don't give up on that idea, but just go with the flow?
Allow for something better. This happens constantly, and you hear this with humans who say, I really want this. This is what I've wanted all my life. And so they plan on it, and they're in that path, and sure enough, these things are starting to fall in place. And then somebody comes along that you didn't expect and say, yeah, well, because you're here, and because this path seems to be working, you weren't aware of it, but I have something better for you. Would you consider? And then it starts to shift, and you have to make the decision. You'd be surprised how many humans struggle with that. And you say, yeah, but this is where I was going, even though where this offer is going to be much better. And the example is this: don't pre-qualify yourself for what you think is going to happen. Instead, follow that path and be circumspect in that. Allow for better things even than you planned for yourself to come along. And when they do, take them intuitively. Take them, because that's the path that is much bigger than anything that you could even plan for yourself. Does this make sense, Kevin?
It does, and thank you so much for that answer.
Yeah.
Thank you. And when you mentioned the word synchronicity somewhere in that conversation, so when somebody, for example, comes into your life through synchronicity, where they've just appeared, and you think, well, where did that come from?
Synchronicity is something much, much larger than most human beings even understand. It has nothing to do with chance. It has to do, first of all, with the allowance of synchronicity. As you walk through life, having listened perhaps even to this documentary, are you aware that there are larger things in play? Would you allow for synchronicity, and that is to say, you go someplace that seems to be completely random, and you're guided there, and suddenly something happens, or you meet something, or someone, or condition, or something takes place that seems to be out of the blue, and yet it is exactly what you were looking for, or leads to what you're looking for. Somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And that never would have happened unless you had randomly perhaps gone to a place. Here's what I want to tell you. Planned synchronicity is a tough one to explain to any human being. There are things going on around you with other people in their synchronicity, in their planning. It culminates quite often in a surprise. And the surprise is for you or for them in what seems to be random luck, but it isn't. In fact, it's that which has been planned by your intent and their intent coming together in what they call the field. What I'm trying to say to you is that against all odds of what you think is possible, there is a plan around you to bring you places that you think are random, and they're not. That thought has been put into you to turn left instead of right in order to meet that person. And that is the beauty of the love of God. You're cared for enough for this to work for both of you. Both of you meaning the one you meet, the one that you are, and personalities, conditions, and things coming together that will make your life better. So in that, the answer is, this is your power. You also have to remember that timing is critical. We have said this before. You have a ticket for the train to where you want to go, and you're sitting there tapping your toe at the station and watching the track and getting impatient, and all of you are. Impatient for something that you know or feel or want, and there you sit. You have to understand that the planning session involves other human beings, but when it happens, it will seem synchronistic. You'll be at the station with the ticket, and then you'll be waiting for the train, and you have to go to the bathroom. So you go into the bathroom, and you meet the person you thought was going to be on the train. That's what we're talking about. And there's no accidents in any of that.
No, I've had that experience recently on my journey, I'll be honest with you, and it was a beautiful one. And the way you explain that is so elegantly, and it makes a lot of sense what you said. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you just two more questions, and then we're going to leave you the energy to go back. But thank you for this. I feel that right now I'm with you right now to ask this question, and it's to do with my own channeling and becoming my own channeler and taking that path and being brave enough to do it, and how rewarding that would be. I'm guessing that's something that I feel that there's something that you need to tell me.
I want to tell you to be patient. I want to tell you that this documentary has to happen, and other things perhaps after that have to happen before you're going to be satisfied with this particular goal that you want. And then I'm also going to tell you something you don't necessarily want to hear, and that is that this is your goal planned by you with your mind that you think is the goal, where perhaps the goal all along is the documentary. And that they will channel. And when the channel happens, you'll love it. And it'll be nice. But it's not the goal. And that's the thing that we say. You have to have allowance for something even better than the goal. Will you channel? Yes. Will it be all that you think? Probably not. Because other things will be bigger than that you will experience because of that which is your desire to channel.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you. And if there was a final message to the audience, what would that be?
It's always the same, Kevin. It's always the same. Every single one watching this needs to know that you're not a victim of this planet or of life. You need to know this, that there is a plan. If I could say this to you in all honesty, love, sincerity, and compassion, on the other side of the veil there is a Creator who knows your name. Not just your name, but a name of a soul that you are that's eternal. You've been here forever. You just happen to be inhabiting this human body at the moment. There's a lot bigger story than you realize. And that name that you have, that soul name, is one that is sung in light when you're not here. You are eternal, and the last breath you take will not be the last breath you take as a soul. That's simply as the human body. And there will be a time when you will awaken and you'll remember everything that I'm saying now, and you'll understand the magnificence of the human being. Why wait till then? Instead, awaken now to a greater possibility of who you are and what can be here, and the fact that God knows you, and that there is a plan, and you are empowered to be so much more than you were ever taught or told by anybody on this planet. It's time you understood that, and time you knew that, and the challenge is here. And that is to be bigger than anything you were ever told, because we're ready to take your hand and make it happen.
Well, God bless and much, much love. Thank you.
And so it is.
Guru Brahma Guru Viష్nu